good morning, afternoon, or evening, and welcome to the Bloody Disgusting Network. The passage of time will now bring you to something strange, unique, and idiosyncratic. Have a good time.
My friendship to all of you precludes my involvement with any one of you. But if you wanna make love, then I do too, and I'll be right there behind you. All in the name of oh, all in the name of oh, all in the name of
Greetings, constant listeners, and welcome to another episode of The Losers Club, a Stephen King podcast. This isn't just another episode, though. No, this might be the most anticipated episode we've ever done with this podcast. And why is that? Well, because we got our name from this book. And what book is that? 1986's It. And this is the first of several episodes that we'll be devoting to this book. And in this first part, we're going to cover the history, the hook, and the structure and format of King's epic, in addition to our first introductions to the novel itself. Now, we have a lot of losers on this episode. We have 4. And that's a little different from the ones that we've had over the past 10 episodes, because this summer, we spent a lot of time in a small town in Maine called Castle Rock. And we're going to move to another small town in Maine. You might know it as Derry, Maine. And this is a town that, also similar to Castle Rock, has a lot of history. The history goes back centuries.
Yeah.
And there's some evil stuff that has gone down. And we're going to go through that evil. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Michael Trashmouth Rothman. I'm editor-in-chief and president of Consequence of Sound, and also a constant contributor of the Losers Club. And you might have heard my voice through every episode of those Castle Rock breakdowns. And here I am, ready to conquer my fears, because I grew up as a little boy wandering around the streets of Derry, acting like a little know-it-all smart mouth, except I was called Trash Mouth, as I already mentioned in my nickname. But I'm not the only loser here. We, similar to the losers, the adult losers in the book, we're scattered everywhere. But let's first talk about the one loser that is in this studio right now, and that is
Mackenzie Haystack Gerber. I'm a constant contributor to this podcast, as well as Halloweenies, which will be wrapping up next month. Yeah, I've been hanging around, running away from bullies, and getting my belly cut.
I know.
So, and not cut in a ripped way, cut in a H way.
But you've slimmed down considerably over the years.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But, you know, I've been running a lot, and I recently punched my coach out, and I'm feeling good.
Well,
I'm ready. I'm ready to tackle my fears. And who else do we have with us?
I believe we have some other adult losers that are scattered in other towns. Let's start with Texas.
Hey everyone, this is Dan Eds Caffrey. I moved to Austin to start a successful limousine company, and my wife Susan's currently freaking out because she has to pick up Al Pacino, and she doesn't know if she can do it.
I hear he's a really nice guy.
What a handful.
I've heard that. Yeah, it is funny. All joking aside, I think one loser a while ago when they were, or one listener a while ago when they were casting the Losers Club was like, "Oh, I assume Dan is Eddie because he disappeared, and I can only assume it's because his mom was overbearing and won't let him do the podcast." But yeah, I don't think I'm too much of a hypochondriac. But I did break my arm when I was 8 years old. I felt the monkey bars. It wasn't in like a cool fight or anything. But I relate.
Did someone
write
loser
a lot
on
to
it?
Eddie's. What do you say? Did someone what?
Someone write loser on it?
No, but my dad did draw. I had 2 casts because my arm was broken for a while, and on the first one, my dad drew Wolverine because I was really into comics at the time and still am. And on the second one, he drew the Red Skull from Captain America. But looking back, I'm like, oh, good, I had a Nazi villain on my.
It's a little controversial there.
I know, yeah. I mean, hey, it's just the funny pages.
Hey, maybe you're a character from Apt Pupil instead.
Oh boy. And who else is out there in the Barrens?
Oh hi, this is Mel Marshhead Castle, standing in for Bev Marsh in Iowa City. Although I'm supposed to be in Chicago with my awful husband.
This is true.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
right.
You have your awful boyfriend, Ian Hardman, who's just he's just a real Tom Rogan also, but
Yeah, just really loud, really demanding. as a
Gosh,
person.
where this
the
from?
joke is that he's not.
He's not.
very nice. He's a nice person.
Well, Mel, we wish you were here in Chicago. No, I can't say it.
I wish you were here also, and that's not a reference to Pink Floyd. That is a legitimate wish. But
A true feeling. I'm very touched.
I think all of us have been touched, though, by this book, and not in a very controversial Catholic Church way. Clearly, we love this book.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, this book hit us in a certain way enough that we called this podcast The Losers Club, as you know it, and have known it for the past year and a half. But what were your first experiences with this book? And I want to start with old Casbrack down there in Texas. Caffrey, tell us your first experiences with it.
Totally. So I think like a lot of kids my age, because I guess I was about 6 when the miniseries came out, and I remember that just being really freaky. I would see the paperback movie tie-in edition in the stores and just be like, why is that creepy ass clown on the cover? And that was always one of the Stephen King books that my dad was like, maybe you can read this one when you're a little bit older. But I actually read it for the first time when I was 9 years old over the summer. I remember I'd watched the miniseries. I wanted to read the book. I was staying with my grandparents at the Jersey Shore in Long Beach Island. And my grandparents didn't really know any better, so they let me check it out from the library. And I remember really digging it and very much understanding all the scary elements of the book, all the monster sequences, but I don't even remember coming across a lot of the sexual stuff, and that's probably because I didn't understand it. And then I think I've reread it like at this point 3 or 4 times, and every time I've reread it, even this most recent time for the podcast, I have just noticed more insane, disgusting details where I'm just like, holy shit! Like, I mean, I read that when I was 9, but I don't know if it was like I repressed it or I just didn't understand it or it traumatized me. But yeah, because I don't remember like the Patrick Hockstetter stuff with Henry Bowers and Bev's relationship with Tom. Like, I got that it was abusive, but I just didn't understand any of the highly suggestive material. Not even suggestive, the very explicit material found in this book. But yeah, it's always been one of my favorites. I definitely do think it has its flaws. I don't know how well it sticks its landing, but I think this just feels like King's master thesis on horror to me. It's like so maximalist, and I'm really excited to talk about it today.
Well, let's hear from Marshhead over there.
Oh, thanks, Trash Mouth. Yeah, I stole a first edition jacketless copy from my aunt's house.
Nice.
It's this giant black book that I still own, and it's got blood red it in like very blocky text on the spine, and it's gigantic. Like, I can't take it anywhere. And just the way it looked was so foreboding that when I was probably like 8 or 9, I took it from her office and just like stuck it in my backpack, and never told her about it, and she never asked about it. And like Caffrey, I definitely glossed over a lot of the more adult aspects of the book, but they really stuck with me for their taboo-ness. So while I didn't know what they really meant, there is like even a particular line in this first section when he's talking about Bev and he says her nipples were cold, hard as bullets. Like, that is the line that I associated with it. And I was like, I'm reading a very grown-up book. I'm very proud of the fact that I'm reading this book because I can read about nipples and take it seriously. And no one else my age is probably doing that. And I do agree that it's definitely like his thesis on horror. I think there's so many references to what he talks about in Danse Macabre, even in this first section alone, that he really feels like he's examining the things he examined there in his nonfiction piece and just kind of like going buck wild in his imagination. And I think it's just it's the epic that I prefer to The Stand and his other longer works, because I think it's much more intimate. And I think he is fascinated with how the minds of children work, and to go from their minds to the adult minds and have the epic be contained within their friend group and their emotions rather than this sprawling full world superflu is something that pays off for me much more than the literally grander setting of The Stand, say.
Mm-hmm. I can see that. I can absolutely see that. What about you, Haystack?
I read this book started reading it about 3 months ago.
Well,
so I
that's-
had never read. So here's the thing. I started to read this book
Mm-hmm.
before we started this podcast.
Yeah.
And I was about 200-300 pages in, and we said, "Oh, we should do this Stephen King podcast." And of course, no one believed us or believed in us. And
They were just walking around the streets of
yeah,
Chicago.
we
with
just kept pleading to
no one to
people that we
believe
wanted
us.
to do this, but no one would give us the money or the time. So we started doing the podcast, and of course I put that on hold and went back and started reading Carrie, and I never went back, knowing we were going to get to it eventually.
Mm-hmm.
But my first experience with it in general was the miniseries,
Yeah.
as it was for a lot of people, I'm sure. And I remember watching that at my grandparents' house. They allowed us to watch it with my older brother. And I was completely and utterly terrified of this clown. And I was always really interested in reading the book. And I'd always heard tales of a turtle. And I was just, and it's at the end of this book. And I just thought, how does this end? How does this end? Like, it's going to get crazy. So I'm really excited to get to that episode. But that was really my first experience was a few months ago. And I loved every minute of it. So I'm really excited to talk about the first chapter today.
Yeah, you're really gung-ho with this reread. I mean, out of everyone, I think the reread...
It's not even a reread.
This wasn't a
It's a
reread.
read.
This is an actual read.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, for me, this was a very tough reread just because I had actually come across this book only like a few years ago. So I always put this one off because it's very dense, it's very large, and I'm just not really crazy about clowns and stuff. It's not that I'm scared or anything, they don't really do much for me. And so even when I was younger, when the miniseries had dropped, like a Jay-Z album, but no, I remember it when it premiered and everyone in school talking about it. And I just didn't see it. And, you missed that first episode, you're kind of screwed. So you're just like, well, I guess I'll rent it one day. And as a kid, you would go up and down, the halls of Blockbuster and just eat up everything, kind of like Pennywise the Dancing Clown himself. I really just always skipped over this because really
You didn't like the poster, right?
Well, yeah, I just didn't. Nothing really drew me to it. It just looked so cartoony. There was something about like seeing, oh look, it's the guy from Home Alone 2 and Rocky Horror, like as this clown. It just looked lame to me. And the cast, I was like, well, I guess I know the dad from Problem Child, and so I just never watched it. I just never watched it. And
my friends and I were obsessed with Seth Green. That's the reason we watched it.
See, but I didn't even know that these characters were in it. So it just was like, I just saw that cover and I was like, well, I don't recognize any of these people. They're a lot older. And it was like a 3-hour movie. And I was like, I don't have the time for this.
I mean, the only child actor that I knew in it was at the time was probably
Jonathan Brandis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because of
Sequest. Never Ending Story 2.
Well, Never Ending Story 2 for you. But for me, it was also Ladybugs, starring Jewish comedian Rodney Dangerfield.
Rodney.
Who was a god to me. And so I knew him. I
swear to God, someone was showing me a picture of Jonathan Brandis on their phone last night because we were talking about celebrity deaths and which one had affected them the most. And I was like, I have no idea who that is. Please tell me who that is. And he's in the miniseries.
Yeah, he's young Bill.
Oh yeah, young Bill.
He's really good at it.
He's really good in it. Yeah,
he's actually,
I gotta say he's still my favorite Bill.
Yeah,
who I actually recognized from the miniseries for like the dumbest thing, because I didn't know who Seth Green was at that time, or I don't even think I guess I knew who John Ritter was. But the kid who plays Ben, who I don't even have his name in front of me, he was one of the McDonald's kids on like a lot of those McDonald's commercials, and he was like the one person I recognized. But
of course, Mike knows that.
Yeah, of course, because I gravitated towards McDonald's or anything that involved bad food. Because you might say I was a little Ben Hanscom myself growing up as a kid. I really first read this book only like a few years ago.
Yeah,
like someone had already mentioned on this episode. It's a very heavy book. I think Mel, you talked about how big the first edition that you had, and for me, it was kind of daunting to carry this thing around, even a few years ago. But I was traveling with it, and so I would read it in South Florida, and then I brought it to Sundance one year in 2015, and I got so tired of carrying around this huge giant book that I actually just started tearing off the pages that I didn't actually want to read. I know I'm a real Nazi over here. It's like the scene from Last Crusade.
Maybe you should try reading books instead of, I guess
destroying
you were reading
them?
it and then
I was reading them and destroying it. And so what was actually kind of funny was I was doing Pennywise's work, because what I was doing was I was taking pages from the book and then just throwing them out and everywhere I was going. So my pages.
So what determined what pages you would throw out and what pages
when
you
I
would
was
keep?
finished. when I was finished with each
Oh,
page,
just
I would
as
just the
He was
next
trying to
page
get
would be the one that
yeah.
would be left, and I just didn't want to. So slowly and surely, I had this little paper thin novella, and there are pages of my book that I read back in 2015, 2016 in South Florida, in Chicago, in Ohio, in Park City, Utah, in Edinburgh, Scotland, in London, England, in York, England, and Manchester, England. All these
I love
pages
this.
scattered there. So somewhere in garbage heaps across the world is my copy of it.
But
And I
you're
read it.
glad you're out there
mirroring
polluting
what
the
they go
world.
through.
Yes.
Like you experience it and then you lose it.
Yes.
And you can't even go back and reference it.
No.
It's just something that looms in the back of your mind.
Yes, and that was actually a big problem when I was reading this book because there, as they get back to these memories, you're like, oh, wait a second, I probably should go back. Oh, there, no, never mind, just keep trucking forward. So, rereading this, this summer, I actually went with the Steven Weber audiobook, and I don't really do audiobooks a lot, but this was a very busy summer, and someone had recommended it to us and said, hey, Weber does a great job, and I'll agree with them. Weber does do a great job. In fact, Weber does a great Pennywise. So I'll be talking a little bits and pieces about the audiobook as well, because I've been taking it one chunk at a time. So he's solid. I mean, look, Steven Weber knows Stephen King because he played Jack Torrance in the 97 miniseries.
Is he better as Pennywise than as Jack Torrance?
Oh, easily. He's not better as Bev Marsh, though.
I think he would admit that too. I read the Scribner edition with the clown smile and the bright red Pennywise clown nose on it. I also have a first edition that Mike gifted to me at home, which will be the one that I sleep with. Yeah, so very interesting. I think we've all met this book at different walks in our life, and yeah.
Yeah, I think. I think when you look at this, though, I think when we want to go into the history of this book, because this is really the episode that we're actually going to be able to delve into this, because we're not going to be scattering this history through the 5 or 6 episodes we're doing this. This is a master thesis of horror in some respects for King. It's his 22nd book, and his 18th book written under his own name. He first conceived the story in 1978, and then he began writing it in 1981. And he said that he originally wanted the title character, Pennywise, to be this kind of like troll, kind of similar to the kind of children's story, Three Billy Goats Gruff. And he wanted this thing to inhabit the local sewer system, and it would be underneath a bridge, and interweaving all these stories between children's and adults. And it's a Norwegian fairy tale. And it's actually, depending on how you get the translation, sometimes it could be like a grandfather, a father, and a son, or it could be 3 different brothers, but they're all like goats that go after this troll. Clearly this isn't a story of goats in Maine, but there's this idea that I think there is a lot of folklore, old style folklore in this story that he has. And it does, to what Mel had suggested, feel like a greatest hits anthology of sorts, of just like, all right, he's putting everything he can into this book. He wrote it. It's one of the longest, in terms of his journey of writing this book. When you look back at, he always ends his books with like the dates of how long he wrote it. Mm-hmm. This one does go on for a while. He started in September 9th, 1981, and he finished in December 28th, 1985. So when he started writing it, and he actually sat down, Cujo was just being published.
I thought you were just bringing Cujo into it in general.
No.
Cujo
I just think
is doing this somewhere else.
I feel like the genesis of this book is really important to find out where King was at the time, his mentality of writing this book, and then also, once it's published, why his feelings were what they are, which I'm going to get to in a second. But he finished the book in a year that saw no King or Bachman books. And in fact, that year, Silver Bullet and Cat's Eye both came out in 1985. So that whole year, when he was finishing up this book, there were no Stephen King books, there were no Bachman books. But Silver Bullet and Cat's Eye both came out, in both films he did write the screenplays for. And so
if Cujo was being published at the time he started this book, was Cujo the last book he had finished? Was that like the one he had finished writing most recently before he started writing this one?
I believe he because he still published several books in like 82, 83, 84. So I imagine he's still concurrently writing those other books like Pet Sematary and whatnot. But he's still steeped in horror. So if you go to his trajectory,
and it's interesting because Cujo in both both Pet Cemetery and Cujo are so bleak and about like how children can't like that monsters are real and that children can't actually overcome them when they confront them. And so I wonder if he was like, man, I gotta do something a little
Yeah,
different.
right. I mean,
Yeah.
just the whole thing about the kid and the closet and Frank Dodd and the boogeyman and I could see where his mind was still lingering on children and how they process horror.
Yeah, because think about it. I mean, from 1981, so he finishes, he finished Roadwork, and then he published Cujo
Huge
in
influence.
81. Yeah, huge influence on this. That great book that is.
Love that book.
In 82, he published The Running Man, and also published The Gunslinger, both books that seemingly have a lot of ties to the past for him, where he just kind of dusted off a lot of ideas and stories that he was going to do to put out there. In 83, he published Christine, Pet Cemetery, and Cycle of the Werewolf. I think there's a lot to take on from that, especially with Christine, the way things are going, like with the whole LeBay storyline and how there seems to be a
And
split
nostalgia.
narrative.
Even the werewolf
The
stuff
50s.
in it
Yeah.
is informed probably by
Oh,
Cycle.
totally.
You know,
I mean,
they're doing that.
The Cycle of Werewolf feels very similar to a lot of the kind of short story-esque motifs that are in it,
Yeah.
for sure. And with Pet Cemetery, I think that bleakness that Mel had pointed out was that idea of like the fractured family and the sins in the past, like coming back to haunt you, whether it's the dead or the grief that you feel and the guilt that you feel that Lewis feels, or even Judd for that matter, I think has a lot of ties with it. And then, in 84, he does The Talisman and Thinner. And I think the sort of tongue-in-cheek horror of Thinner, you could almost argue, is very similar to some of the stuff that's welded into this as well, because there is a lot of this kind of adult. I feel like Thinner, and on that episode I really hammered down there the idea that Thinner has a very pulpy Playboy adult fiction vibe to it. It feels like adult horror, and I think that there are parts of it, especially when you get to the adult portions, and especially with what everything that happens with Bev when she's an adult and Tom, feel very in sync with some of the stuff he was going in with Thinner. So when you're saying that this does feel like some sort of thesis on what he's talking about with horror, I think you're dead on right with that, because I think that's exactly what he was working towards with this.
We'll probably get into this, but it's also extremely meta. Like
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's so many characters,
with Bill especially.
Oh, yeah.
I think I remember from the miniseries they even they show Bill as like, they show one of Bill Denborough's books and it's called The Glowing instead of The Shining, which is like a little yeah, there's definitely a lot of those winks of like, oh, like she didn't like those stupid horror books. Like, who would write those kinds of things, But anyway.
Well, either way, this is a big production, even from the publisher, because he received a $3 million advance for the book.
Good God.
So yeah, pretty big. I mean, Viking was just all in on this. They were like, all right, you're going to give us. I mean, because if you think about it, like, look at all the books that they had published previously. They did, they did Christine. They did The Talisman. They did, they did Cujo, Firestarter, The Dead Zone. I mean, they clearly knew what they had on their hands, and they were like, "Oh wow, this guy's going to write this huge giant tome. Like, then we got to put some money into this." Now, when it came out, it was a success. Publishers Weekly listed it as the best-selling book in America in 1986. It won the British Fantasy Award in 1987 and received nominations for the Locus and World Fantasy Awards that same year. Although not everyone was big on it. In fact, the New York Times had a very not so positive review for it. I'm going to read just a little passage from that review, because I think it's interesting to kind of use that as a preamble to what my next point is going to be.
Sure.
Which is going to be where King was in his mind after publishing this book, because this does feel very much like a purge of a certain Stephen King that we might not actually see in future books coming up. So this is the section it's towards the very end of the New York Times review, which was published in, I believe, August of 86. Oh, wow. My birthday, August 21st, 1986. I was celebrating a 2-year-old birthday at the time.
Guys, it's all about cycles. I'm feeling this very keenly in a borderline supernatural sense.
It's very crazy. So somewhere I was 2 years old, rolling around probably in my Knight Rider car with my parents, who were still together. And unhappily married in South Florida. But either way, this is the section I'm going to pull out. The novel is filled with every sort of scary set piece that Mr. King is so adept at contriving. Nightmarish chases, trips into the cellars where monstrous creatures may be lurking, a photograph album that bleeds, a bathtub drain that cackles hideously and gouts blood. I don't know offhand if it was Mr. King who first revised the verb form of gout, whose obsolete meaning, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, was to drop or to gutter, but blood in these pages gouts everywhere like water gushing from a fire hose. Such set pieces help to hold our interest in this epic of coprophilia. So do Mr. King's raw powers as a yarn spinner of horrors, his sense of pace and scene, his almost adolescent affinity for the gross and vulgar. But he has set himself two formidable plot challenges. One is to produce something terrifying enough to justify Stanley Uris's decision to commit suicide, rather than face whatever is lurking in the sewers of Derry. The other is to explain what moved the children to pledge their lives to the city on that fateful day of the blood oath. In neither of these challenges does Mr. King quite succeed. Nothing ever explains why Uris cuts his wrist or why the gang has to reunite. The story moves along, but for all its awesome stage effects, it huffs and puffs and creaks and clanks. It lacks the political vision of the Dead Zone. It misses the logic of Firestarter and Cujo. It wants the brooding, ominous mood of The Shining. It has nothing like the funereal oppressiveness of Pet Sematary. It tries too hard. It reaches for too much. It's too damn complicated. Or maybe you simply have to have a thing about drains for it to terrify you the way it obviously meant to. Now, we know that King at this point in his life, 71 years old, his birthday was Friday, he doesn't really give a shit about reviews. He just doesn't care.
Right.
But at this point, I'm pretty sure he fucking cared every bit.
Why? Why do you say that?
Because, I mean, at the time, I think there's definitely that assumption that he is the master of horror. He made his name. He definitely embraces that, and we see that throughout the 80s and all. But there's something that's interesting that I didn't realize that happened after it that I found in my Mike Hanlon-esque research for this history.
So this is Mike's interlude number one.
And this is interlude number one. Apparently, after the publishing of it, King wanted to quit horror. So
Whoa.
this is from a piece that was in Time magazine, who cites one of their 1986 profiles with King at the time. For now, this is a quote that King told Time at the time of release of it.
Okay.
For now, as far as the Stephen King Book of the Month Club goes, this is the clearance sale time. Everything must go. The press is, and this is from the article, the press is still warm from printing his 1,100-page doorstop of a novel, as the magazine described it. The indisputable king of horror was ready to toss out both his bread and the butter. Now, the writer of this article, who was looking back, this is from last year when the movie became, this giant juggernaut blockbuster.
Right.
Times Stefan Kampfer, he speculated that King's decision might have had something to do with the competition nipping at his heels. He conceded that the British horror novelist Clive Barker, King thought Clive Barker was better than I am now and a lot more energetic. And so he also, this guy, Kampfer also references the same profile that was in Time and says that King was really self-deprecating in his profile. So this is, again, right when it finally is being published. So you'd think that he'd be like, oh yeah, oh my God, gung-ho, I just finished this fucking epic book. But he called it a very badly constructed book. And he claimed to have had no more than 3 original ideas in his life. And then he described his writing as the literary equivalent of a Big Mac and large fries from McDonald's. And then the writer, Kampfer, goes on to say that given the popularity of that meal, perhaps this was less of a jab than a credit. Now, my theory on this is that if you look back at the trajectory of when this book came out and what was actually coming forward, he was coming off of a year of doing... So 85, he finishes it. Right. So that same year, he also was working on 2 movies that were coming out at the same time the following year. One was obviously Maximum Overdrive, which is just Maximalist King at that point, which is just
stellar,
crazy. And it's, by all accounts, he was just a crazy cokehead during the production of this. So that could also have to do with a lot of his self-deprecation here.
I think so.
But here's the thing that I think. And this is what I think it really kind of veers into what the works that come after this, because we start seeing little hints and
We
pieces
get
of Prestige King.
The next two things we get are Misery and then Tommyknockers, yes?
Yes, Tommyknockers, which is, we'll go into that.
Tommyknockers is
Yeah,
another Coke book. That's
Yeah.
like the ultimate Coke, King on Coke book. Yeah.
But if you recall, what film do we consider the greatest Stephen King adaptation that comes out in '86? What's the year? What movie comes out then?
In '86,
we screened it at our film festival over the summer. It involves 4 boys going on.
Oh, Stand By Me, of course, yeah.
So this is one of the first times that you really do see Prestige King coming out onto the screen. And I think, this is just me theorizing and speculating, because this is my favorite part of the podcast, is to figure out where his mind is at this point. I think, if you recall, they didn't want to even call it The Body. They didn't even want to promote it with Stephen King in there. And I think at that point, maybe he felt, well, I am one of the best-selling writers that's out there. I am considered, this huge, magnanimous writer, but I don't get the credit that I deserve. I feel he probably felt as if, like, all right, this is it. I'm done with horror. I need to start actually proving my chops in another field. And I feel like it is The Purge at that point, which is why, Mel, I agree with you. I think this is absolutely his master's thesis, but I also feel it's almost like his long love letter to the horror franchise in general. And
it's interesting that Misery is next, which is about like a writer being trapped by expectations.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Also,
it was Dan who first said his thesis on horror. Don't give me credit for that.
Either way. Well, and I'm wondering if I subconsciously ripped it off. I was just looking for some articles while you guys were talking, and he originally called it his final exam on horror. So maybe I can't even take credit for that. And I know what's interesting is that Joe Hill, his son, his book Nosferatu, which has a lot of similarities to it, both in size and scope, and the idea of these children dealing with this supernatural entity. He has called that. I know for a fact Joe Hill has called that his master thesis on horror. So hey, like father, like son.
It's interesting. It certainly speaks to that sort of greatest hits idea, because he gets 2 different sections to be able to go off on 2 different styles of horror, from the children's point of view and the adult's point of view. So it is like a perfect vehicle for him to just kind of weld in everything possible. And also he gets, it isn't even just the 50s and 80s he gets to talk about. He gets to talk about the 1800s, the early 19th century. It's very expansive.
The nature of Pennywise lends itself to pulling in all sorts of horrors because it's anybody's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like he just had free reign to bring in anything that he thought was scary. So yeah, absolutely. I think at the time, he probably definitely felt like spent, and this is probably it. He went on to write Misery, Tommyknockers, Dark Half, and then some short stories and things. But I will say that's interesting, Mike, with the Stand By Me thing. Maybe he was like, well, I wonder if he was kind of burned that they didn't use his name in the, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And was kind of like, and then getting knocked by the Times and certain publications. Maybe he was kind of thinking of going a different route.
This book feels so huge and personal, and it's a bid. It's like an argument for, I think, the power of pulp when we get into it with our own minds. Like, again, it's just so close to Danse Macabre, and later we will actually see, the literal gill man that Stephen King cites in Danse Macabre as like maybe the first monster he was scared of, but you could see the zipper running up the back, so it's okay, but it touches something deeper. And so I can see if he felt like this was failing, this effort to kind of legitimize horror that we experience through pulpy things, he might get really insecure about it.
No, totally. And that goes back to his earliest books, even Salem's Lot. Ben Mears is pretty much that sort of idealized version of what a writer could be, this guy that could shrug off any of the critics and still win at the end of the day. Even Bill Denbrough, the character itself, which we'll go into in our heroes and villains section, especially in this part of the book, when you actually find out the history of him as a writer, it does feel as if King is basically saying fuck off to like all his professors that give him
Why
shit.
can't a story just be a story?
Yeah, which is one of my favorite sections of this
love
entire
that.
first part, because I've definitely had those sort of experiences in college where you have these.
Oh, you better believe I'm feeling it now.
Yeah. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, you guys are both like entering the ritual of Chad right now.
But that is interesting about the Misery point, because if you look at Misery and the Dark Half, those 2 books are meditations on being a writer and having kind of coming to terms with maybe your own sort of sins and
Yeah. So it seems like he was shook. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
yeah.
So, does anyone else have any other thoughts they want to discuss on that?
Well, it is dedicated to his children.
Oh, it's dedicated to his children. Well, I'm sure he was thinking of his children big time, especially with the idea that, Bill's relationship with Georgie, for sure.
I got some just like fun facts. They're not that he actually, and I actually didn't know this till just.
I love fun facts.
Fun fact. Me too. You know why? Because they're fun.
They are fun.
Yeah, I don't care for fun facts.
Oh wow.
Mel's gonna take a break while Dan goes into the fun facts.
I want miserable.
Please mute me.
I want miserable facts. No, just that he actually based Derry on Bangor, Maine, which I didn't know about until just now. I guess I pictured Bangor as being a little bit more urban, but I guess it's not. And I maybe you've seen this interview, Mike, because I know you're a big Conehead. But in a 2005 interview with Conan O'Brien, King talked about how he had been sat next to Ronald McDonald on a plane once. There was a guy playing Ronald McDonald who happened to be in his full clown attire, and King kept thinking like, "Oh my God, if this plane crashes, I'm gonna die next to a clown." Which I thought that was pretty funny.
That's actually hilarious. I had never heard of that before.
Yeah, it's a 2005 interview, so I guess that was when Conan was on NBC.
He's on late night still.
Hey, they're about to they're archiving all those episodes, so we can probably find it.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, we should definitely share that once that hits the web in January.
It's a shame that nobody had smartphones at the time to be able to snap up a photo of that, because that would be just an amazing photo of.
Oh, it would go viral in a heartbeat, especially all the. I remember when the adaptation of it, the latest one came out last year. There were all those clown sightings like in England and elsewhere, so I'm sure that would have gotten just as much attention.
Yeah.
But that's all I got. I think it's pretty well covered.
Don't you guys think that? I mean, I feel like, and this could just be my bias, this book kicked off the scary clown craze. Like, I don't know, were there a ton of scary clown media like before this that was getting attention? Like, I
think was Family Funhouse out before this, the Tobe Hooper movie? I mean, that's not that famous, so I don't think it would have been that visible, but that's like the only thing I can think of maybe. But did the rest of you have anything?
The only thing that always struck me about this book, and it's not fair because they're two different mediums, but I just felt the conceit of Pennywise itself is so similar to Freddy Krueger in A Nightmare on Elm Street that it just, and A Nightmare on Elm Street came out 2 years before this. And again, he started writing this book before Nightmare on Elm Street ever hit theaters. But the similarities and the parallels between the two are, it's kind of impossible to dismiss.
I mean, I guess there was let's see, Fun. What year was it? No, Funhouse was 81.
Funland came out in 87, but I'm looking and
Funhouse was 81. That's the Tobe Hooper film.
So that would have predated it then, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then
he had already started writing before that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true. And Killer Clowns from Outer Space is 88. So yeah, I think this was the first. Well, and it's so funny too because, like I was saying, when I was a kid, this was known as the Scary Clown movie.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's so funny because if you look at this, I have the first edition right here, which is why I read. If you look at the cover, and I think this is accurate, it's Georgie's boat about to go down the sewer grate, and this green reptile claw is reaching up. So in the original marketing and on the jacket, they didn't even lean into the clown thing, and I think that's because, as we know, Pennywise isn't actually a clown. And even though that's still his calling card in a way, so it's funny that this is like this ultimate scary clown book when it's actually something much bigger and deeper than that.
Well, right, and now the clown part is played up entirely. Like the Scribner that Mac and I have is,
Oh, totally.
It's a grinning clown.
And maybe they just didn't maybe King at the time and his publishers, Viking, they just didn't think that was enough of a horror trope to lean into.
Which is kind of baffling. Well, it's kind of baffling to me because, like, I mean, if you think about it, in the late 70s, from 1972 to, I think, 78, like, John Wayne Gacy he was making headlines. I mean, he killed, like, was it over 30 people in the 70s alone? And he was known as the killer clown. I mean, that was...
Yeah, Pogo the Clown, yeah.
Does King ever mention him in any, like, was there any inspiration drawn from that?
I actually don't think there were obviously comparisons, and I think he's acknowledged maybe like subconsciously being inspired. But I think he was most inspired by the clowns that he actually directly references in the book, Clarabelle, Bozo, and Ronald McDonald. If you watch, actually, when I was reading this, I went back and I watched the first appearance of Ronald McDonald back when Willard Scott from the Today Show, or maybe that's it, whatever news show he was on. Back he played Bozo, and he also played Ronald McDonald. And Ronald McDonald, like in his early appearances, is pretty freaky looking. Like he has a the idea too is that he's always kind of like eating McDonald's food. So he has this I think he has like a cup or like a fry dispenser or something as a nose, and he's always carrying like this tray of hamburgers. It's really weird, and he's always got like a tray on his head full of food. It's very surreal and strange. And there's a video that's like evolution of Ronald McDonald.
It's very reminiscent of most Americans these days.
Well, I think too, it's important to note that the children in the book and the characters in the book do not see clowns as scary until they see Pennywise. They think of Bozo and they think of Ronald McDonald, and they're like, oh yes, that nice clown that I watched on TV. It's like the first presentation of like, what if I subvert this normally happy child associated thing?
Right, which is I think the whole reason why he adapts that visage,
Know what else? Know what I actually think went a really long way. In addition to it was probably around the same time the movie came out. To making kids scared of clowns was on The Simpsons, where Homer builds that clown bed for Bart. And, what does Bart say? He's like can't
clown's
sleep,
gonna
clown
eat me.
Oh wait, when's Poltergeist? When did that come out?
Oh,
that came out in 82.
Yeah.
Oh, so that would have
I mean, I really do think the
80s
really just kind of capitalized on the idea that clowns are not like the fun
to be
Ringling
trusted.
Brothers.
Wait, I
mean,
just that clown bed though from Simpsons. The if you shall die before you wake.
Yeah. But by then that was like the 90s already. So I think at that point it was already part of the pop culture lexicon. I mean, everywhere I've looked, there are no links between King admitting that the Gacy thing was an influence. I mean, if anything, he says that his influence for the story really came from just him like walking over a bridge or something, and just imagine the idea that there would be the trolls under there, and that's where he kind of got into the whole folklore incident. So I don't know. It is odd that like it just so happened to be this serendipitous.
And I love your point about Nightmare on Elm Street, which was like one of the first horror films to get fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, I can't think of too many other ones in that.
No, it was like the first major one to do it, and it like blew people's minds. But it's also grounded in a town where the history is sort of cycling, and
and it's generational too, because you have the parent. They're paying for the parents' sins.
First kids all were killed, and now their second are going after. Well, in that deleted scene.
I wonder if I would have loved if because they all had all these cocktail hours in Hollywood at the time, and Dino probably held a lot of them with all the horror masters that came in, and like Wes Craven, hot off of A Nightmare on Elm Street, walks in and he's like, "Hey, Steven, why don't we ever work together?" He's like, "Well, I'm working on a book right now. It's about a killer clown that haunts people's greatest fears." And then like Wes Craven's like, "Did you not see one fucking movie I made?" Like,
well, it's funny too because they have even like one of the chapters, the house on Nightbolt Street, which sounds a lot like A Nightmare on Elm Street. Mac, I wanted to ask you really quick.
Yeah.
That what's you and Justin always said there's that gif from Doctor Who. I think it's Doctor Who of the clown of that sad clown or whatever. Was that pre-it? Because that gif always kind of freaks me out.
That was I want to believe it is. I'll look it up and I'll let you know. But
that is like one of your favorite go-to gifs.
Love the
to
clown.
Go. It's very creepy. It's wait. That was
the Brits were ahead of us in terms of what is scary.
Hey, the British get a lot of things before us. Have you heard of the Fab Four, the Beatles?
God.
I wanted to ask back in the section about where we talk about our first experience, just super quick, if you can be as concise as possible, what loser you most connected to when you read the book, and like what, maybe not even necessarily your favorite, but I have to imagine that was part of why we dig this book so much.
Well, how about you?
Oh, it's Bev by virtue of
gender,
which like sucks. But it's Bev and Richie actually, Richie and Bev, because of I was a bit of a trash mouth, and I did a lot of comedy in college and in high school, and it's sort of the defense mechanism resonated with me.
A lot of people are like, chill, Mel, chill. Instead of beep beep. I actually, for me, it was I love. Richie, just in terms of him being a class clown, no pun intended. because that was always kind of, I used to get like kicked out of the classroom for just trying to make jokes and everything. But
You did?
yeah. And I was also very loud. Like they used to always say that like my favorite teacher, who I love to death, she'd always be like, God, Mike, like I love, the insight that sometimes you bring or whatever, but you're really loud and I need you to leave the classroom. And that was like always, she would always, there would always be this like prelude to like, she'd always basically soften it by saying like, look, you're great, but you got to get out of here. And like, you got to leave. You're just too loud. But for me, I also really love Mike Hanlon. I think like the idea of, I went into college with the idea and knowledge that I was going to get a history degree because I love research and I love looking stuff up. And so for me, there's something really interesting about his character and very romantic, almost, this idea that he's like the old knight that stayed behind. Like I really kind of gravitated towards that big time. So those two,
he's
for
definitely
me,
one that comes out more when you read this book as an adult. I feel like as a kid, you're like, Mike's lame.
Yeah. Well, that's funny because I read it as an adult. So like, it just, I do wonder if I read this as a kid, if I really would have loved Richie even more, but I don't know.
True.
What about you, Mac?
Well, when I saw the miniseries, I loved Bill but also really loved Mike Hanlon. Even watching it as a kid, I loved that idea, that character, or the older Mike Hanlon at least.
Yeah.
And then reading it this year, I feel the same way. And I know that I've been cast as Hanscom, and I feel like I embody a lot of those traits, I guess, or that character. But I do think that I connected most with the way that Mike deals with things, and as a child and as an adult, I feel like I probably would be the one to stay in Chicago and give you guys a phone call in the future.
Yeah, well, I'll make sure I block your number. Caffrey, what about you?
I actually related the most to Ben, I think, growing up. I feel like we get the biggest sense of his internal world the most out of all the losers. Like I feel like we're with all of them, I guess, the same amount of time, but you get like his inner monologue a bit. And I didn't struggle with my weight or anything growing up, but I did just like how kind of contemplative he was, and I think I related just him getting lost in the world around him in imagination. That sounds like a humble brag, like, oh, I was so imaginative or something. But yeah, I think just because we see his widest range of emotions, he was just the one that appealed to me. And I love the library. I still love the library. It's like my favorite place to go in the world. So yeah.
Well, I love the library also, but did you have something else to add to that?
Just to wrap it up, Dan, that Doctor Who episode was from the 7th Doctor and Ace, and it was called The Greatest Show, and it's Chief Clown, and it was 1988.
Chief Clown.
Oh.
So
88.
I'll post that GIF on our socials.
The original Pennywise.
Great episode, great Doctor, and great companion as well. But the Chief Clown had some classic moments, eating up the screen time.
It is very,
not
very
the original
theatrical.
Pennywise if it's from 88.
No, it's
Yeah,
not.
no,
It's
not
not
at all.
But the original Pennywise
From
is in the book that we're
a
talking
galaxy
about
far,
today.
far away.
It by Stephen King.
Well, who wants to read the synopsis of their book? And please do tell us what edition it is and who published it.
I've got the first edition. If you guys.
Oh,
want to
let's
it.
hear that
let's-
first edition.
All right,
Let's
here we
get
go. Here we go. And this book was $22.95 back in the 80s. Okay.
Wow.
Derry, a small city in Maine, a place as hauntingly familiar as your own hometown. Only in Derry, the haunting is real. It began for the losers on a day in June of 1958, the day school let out for the summer. That was the day Henry Bowers carved the first letter of his name on Ben Hanscom's belly and chased him into the Barrens. The day Henry and his Neanderthal friends beat up on stuttering Bill Denbrough and Eddie Kasprak. The day stuttering Bill had to save Eddie from his worst asthma attack, man, spoiler alert, ever by riding his bike to beat the devil. It ended in August with 7 desperate children in search of a creature of unspeakable evil in the drains beneath Derry, in search of it. And somehow it ended. Or so they thought. Then, on a spring night in 1985, Mike Hanlon, once one of those children, makes 6 calls. Stan Uris, accountant. Richard Records Tozier, L.A. disc jockey. Ben Hanscom, renowned architect. Beverly Rogan, dress designer. Eddie Kasprak, owner of a successful New York limousine company. And Bill Denbrough, best-selling writer of horror novels. Bill Denbrough, who now only stutters in his dreams. These 6 men and one woman have forgotten their childhoods, have forgotten the time when they were losers. But an unremembered promise draws them back. The present begins to rhyme dreadfully with the past. And when the losers reunite, the wheels of fate lock together and roll them toward the ultimate terror. In the biggest and most ambitious book of his career, Stephen King gives us not only his most towering epic of horror, but a surprising re-illumination of the corridor where we pass from the bright mysteries of childhood to those of maturity. I think that's actually a really good summary.
I think that's really good.
Long.
That's a great book.
It's so long, and it actually spoils pretty much like
Yeah, it's so
our section
specific.
we're gonna talk about. Yeah, but I do like that it's absent of those like a spine-chillingly romp of a fucking thing, or I feel like that's how all these summaries we usually read are very sensationalist, I think, and I think that accurately describes the novel, and not one mention of a clown, which is interesting.
That is true. Let's go to the more modern version. Mel, you have the Scribner one, right?
I do, yeah. The 2016 Scribner paperback. This might not appeal to you, Dan, if you don't like the rip-roaring fucking description.
I don't know why I said fucking. I couldn't think of another adjective. I do love them. They're always very...
Also, worth noting that the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner calls it the Moby Dick of horror novels.
Whoa.
Yeah. Okay,
Jesus.
to the children, the town was their whole world. To the adults, knowing better, Derry, Maine was just their hometown. Familiar, well-ordered, a good place to live. It was the children who saw and felt what made Derry so horribly different. In the storm drains, in the sewers, it lurked, taking on the shape of every nightmare, each person's deepest dread. Sometimes it reached up, seizing, tearing, killing. The adults, knowing better, knew nothing. Time passed and the children grew up, moved away. The horror of it was deep buried, wrapped in forgetfulness, until the grown-up children were called back once more to confront it as it stirred and coiled in the sullen depths of their memories, reaching up again to make their past nightmares a terrible present reality. Frightening, epic, and brilliant, Stephen King's It is one of the greatest works of a true storytelling master. And I actually prefer that to Dan's version. I think it's just vague enough.
Yeah, it's concise and just gives you a little taste.
I think you needed a little bit more of an expansive synopsis. I don't know why I said it that way, but back then in the 80s, because I think people really did judge a book by its cover back then.
Well, there was another 80s one. I think it was the Signet edition that just said, if you love turtles and clowns, you're going to love me.
Oh, that's the
and
one
then
I
it said,
had.
Dash it, the book.
Dash it, the book.
Wait, really?
No, I didn't do that. You just made that up.
Sorry.
Looks like we have our own trash mouth on the other side here. All right, now, we've read the synopsis. We've talked about the history. We've given our first introductions, but we haven't talked about the hook.
Ah, yes. Don't you see? Don't you see how clear it all is? Not only can you see the future, I can change it. You can change it, exactly.
All right. Well, the hook is the section of the episode in which we talk about what the hell is this book about? What are the themes?
Fear, baby.
Fear, baby? All right. Well,
Oh,
we'll
fear
move on
babies.
to heroes and villains. No, I'm just joking. No, that's it. What do we think this book is about? I mean, we got almost 1,200 pages. There's a lot of themes. There's a lot of things to chew on. But at the core, if you really had to choose,
I would say it's about growing up.
Wow.
And forgetting your childhood, necessarily forgetting your childhood and becoming a grown-up and forgetting the things that scare you the most, but getting back in touch with your childhood and the things that scare you the most. So, but it's also about fear.
I think the major theme is friendship and aligning with like-minded others to do things that you cannot do on your own.
Ooh, much like this podcast.
yes.
Pretty much.
I think that I think the childhood, but specifically the passage of childhood to adulthood, which, I love this book, but one of my main complaints is that I think because it's so many pages, King really leans into the symbolism, like the glass passageway from the kids' library to the adult library, and what ends up happening to that at the end of the novel. Like, I feel like that's all explicitly very spelled out. And also I think and King's been here before with Salem's Lot and some of his other books. I think just the dark underside of a small town, like how poisonous small town America can be, and how much it can trap you.
Yeah, it's so good in this one though.
Yeah, I feel like it really is about like the sins that haunt America still, like, just like and he gets at it from so many different levels, with whether he talks about what happens in the 80s or the 50s. There's just so many allusions to just like bigotry and economic like downfalls, and even just like the way that the Industrial Revolution evolution has changed the culture for better and worse.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just a lot to this book.
Well, and the kids are all the victims of bigotry. They're marginalized for one reason or another.
Yeah.
I love
For
how
being
that-
Jewish, being a woman, being black, being overweight, having glasses, being a hypochondriac. Yeah, like they all have something, I think.
I love how
they
that.
made.
Yeah, I love how that Times review is like, this isn't political enough. This isn't this. This isn't that. And I just thought, did you read this book? Like, it's
Yeah.
all in there.
Were you ever a child?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also love how they like unfavorably compare it to Firestarter. Like it doesn't have any of these great qualities of Firestarter.
No.
Really?
Which-
like,
Yeah.
Which I thought Firestarter was the most hollow of his books, to be honest with
oh,
you.
I
But
completely, yeah.
But hey,
No,
it was very political.
It's also there's a huge deal to be made about how when you do grow up, you stop seeing the magic and you're impervious to insights that strike you as a child because you're actually more open to believing and therefore more open to impacting the world.
It's true.
I mean, I think there's something to be said about the way that everyone kind of just turns a cold shoulder to things. You know, I mean, like even in this section, we see a little bit of that when Mike Hanlon's talking about how he's doing research, and there are people in the town that know that there is Pennywise out there, that they've seen this sort of evil, for lack of a better word, that has haunted this town over and over again, and they don't know how to explain it. They, you know, you have old souls that are talking about hearing the voices down the drain also, but just kind of being like, I'm just gonna shrug it off. And I think there's something to be said about that idea of the American sins, you know, like
Becoming
whether it's
complacent with the way things are and
Yeah.
not being a voice for change because you just want to be left alone and, you know, minding your own business.
You know,
and
just
your
want to
own-
be comfortable in your conservatism. Can't
Yeah.
have blood
raking-
all
yeah.
over the bathroom.
I mean,
Raking
change
your-
is terrifying.
Something I always think of, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Is something I really try and do as I get older is just keep an open mind about everything, you know. And you know, we're all critics and everything, and so obviously we can fall into being opinionated. But I think it's a real struggle as you become an adult to realize that your point of view is not the only point of view, and that there. I mean, it sounds so simple and like hippy dippy, but I really do think a lot of adults I encounter, they'll just like flippantly write off things so much, you know, whether it's a movie or someone else's opinion. It's like I always talk about when we're talking about horror movies and people pick apart the logic. And I've seen so many adults and, you know, for Halloween been like, oh yeah, that makes sense, dropping the knife. And that to me is just such like a rigid adult viewpoint. And I think when you're a kid, you're just like, everything's more flexible, you know, which is both why they can see Pennywise and also why they become victims of him in a way. So yeah, and that really resonated with me this time around more so than the past.
And each of them listen to the other one when they are asking, you know, what did it look like to you? What is your worst fear? And everyone is legitimized through that, where the adults, like, I mean, even in the first section, we have the woman who drives away, even though or I don't know if it's actually a woman, but someone who drives away when she sees Adrian Mellon being killed. Like they can't even look at the horror. It's very, very interesting.
Well, I think there is a parallel to be made between these themes of the idea of the sins and fear and how they're intertwined and how our own fears inhibit so much change in society and vice versa. And I think that there's something to be said about how King uses the seed of horror, which is something that he really, you know, obviously became a cash cow for, and use that to be able to just kind of meditate on so many things about it, you know. And I think, like, you know, he's been quoted as saying like this book was the summation of everything I've learned and done in my whole life up to this point. And I think it's really hard to dispute that after reading this book. I think, you know, we've already talked about in the history of this book that this does feel like a master's thesis of his work, but I think he really does get to the core. It does feel less almost of a thesis and more of a dissertation of just what fear is and what it does to society, what it does to people, and how that infects every facet of life. I mean, Derry is such an interesting microcosm of America. I mean, there's something to be said about this being set in the 50s, in which idealized America existed. You know, it's like the post-World War II nuclear family, bullshit, Blue Velvet style ending where it just, everything's great, everything's grand. We're going to go get some milk. We're going to go get some, you know, ice cream, hot dogs, hamburgers, you know, fireworks, and, you know,
Carnival, Canal Days.
Yeah, and like it's like, so what a grand time to be alive, and yet you're
There's a
absolutely
seedy underbelly.
just and there's a seedy underbelly. So I mean,
Well, not only that, but it's amplified when Adrian's boyfriend is being like, you think there's bigots everywhere, and like you're right, but like let me show you just how much it's amplified here. It's very strange, but it is just the seed that's existing everywhere taken to a natural conclusion given the powers of this like evil force that's lived there for so long.
Which it seems very meta in a way that he's the whole discussion, and obviously we'll talk about Adrian Mellon and his lover in the heroes and villains section, but that does feel very meta in the sense that he's acknowledging himself that Daria is this sort of microcosm that he's created, that a lot of the themes and the examples that he's going to be presenting in here are very heightened and sensationalized in a way that he is using this as metaphor, and that this is saying something larger about maybe America, maybe just life in general.
The great thing about this book is everyone's been a kid and everyone's been scared of something at one point in their lives, especially when they were kids. And it is such a tale that anyone can really relate to. I mean, there's so many characters. I mean, you have the Lucky Seven first, just right off the gate, and then a ton on top of that. And at some point, either in their childhood or in their older lives, you can relate to one of those people in some way. You know what I mean?
Well, I think there's something to be said about the 27, in that so much of our life we keep wondering, well, we're growing up, things are changing, but do things really change? I mean, do we really? I mean, maybe we're not as terrified as the dark as we were as a kid, but we're still terrified of something else. And that whatever fear we had at age 11 or 12 is going to be replaced by another fear, or it could very well be the same fear.
Well, look at Eddie in the book. I mean, he's like an amplified version of himself. Even though he's forgotten everything, I mean, he's like afraid of sickness his entire life. I mean, Bev is afraid of her dad her entire life, which is why she's marrying her dad. Yeah.
They don't end up examining the fears; they just grow complacent with them and like sort of learn to live under their sway while thinking that they are successful. And I think that just ties into what happens when we become adults. And I think it's also, the message is, if you look at the positive side of it and how this thing can be combated, a big part of it is that it's unfair who that mission falls to. It falls to children that are not capable, or that we wouldn't think are capable and shouldn't be having to see these things. And it falls to the members of the communities that are marginalized, instead of like some people that are privileged and better able to tackle this sort of stuff. It has to fall to them.
It reminds me of almost like a far more deeper and far more nuanced and far more complicated Salem's Lot. I mean, a lot of Salem's Lot is about xenophobia for me. It's the outsider coming in and ruining this small town life. But that fear of that small town life changing for the worst is embedded in this book.
He's definitely come back home to that story for sure, in terms of like a small town and a seemingly nice, great place to live, but there's just something that's not quite right, and something that everybody have gotten really comfortable with. I mean, right down to that sequence with the cops with Adrian Mellon and the trial, and I love that line where they say a clown was never mentioned or something like that. And it's just like people are so willing to look away just because they don't want to have to deal with what's really happening.
And it's individualist versus collective.
Well,
again, like I think friendship is the driving force here, because everyone is complacent because they just want to worry about themselves and they want to get the promotion and be the police chief that has the good record, or no one can think about how banding together to do the right thing is worth it. It's just never worth it for them. They just want to look out for their selfish wants.
Well, and there's something to be said about him taking this very microscopic approach to what the individual adds to the greater point of society. I mean, if you really look and see what experience is and what identity is, identity really just is. I always think of the visual metaphor of taking your finger onto a desk and dragging it, and you just gather dust on that finger. And I feel like that's what life is. It's just, you just keep living, and whether you gather your passions, your fears, your experiences, they all inform who you are, but they also inform how you are going to interact in society. And by him having this wide ensemble of different fears, experiences, and anxieties, he does tailor it to the greater Derry and how those kind of connections and those complexities sort of kind of mingle together. And I think there's something to be said about what that means as the overall whole to what fear, anxiety, passion, everything, and how that informs society as a whole, and how it maybe fear is what always triumphs. Do you feel that, or am I just totally?
do.
off?
I mean,
yeah, totally. Because
yeah.
no one's talking about it is a huge. No one will connect and share. Like that's the whole reason that the kids can actually do anything is that, and there's a whole big moment where they have to all say that they believe or that it happened or that it was real. That's way further in the book.
I mean,
but
no, I agree. I think, I mean, the first interlude ends with Mike saying, "Please God, don't let me have to call them." You know, like he's scared, and you think still at this point, like absolutely, the fear is just totally rattled, and you think it's just overwhelming.
So it's almost like at this point in the book, it's as if he's suggesting that fear is a fuel of society in a way, that we are just driven by our own fear because we're often prisoners to our own fear, and that it's those that either turn aside to it, like maybe the 6 adults that leave town, or those that stick around that have to like really face it and kind of live with it and kind of dwell with it. And maybe that's the sort of dichotomy that King is kind of presenting here, is that there are those that live with it and there are those that shy away with it. But does anyone ever really conquer it? Where do you stand on the idea of what fear does to this person? Do you think that we ever do conquer it? I mean, where we are right now in this book, is this something that is conquerable, or is it something that we have to just keep putting back in our pocket?
I think it's something, I don't think we put it back in our pocket. I think the way to function healthily is to, I'll put more succinctly. I think the way to face your fear is to acknowledge your fear. I think by nature of what fear is, you can never fully get over it. But I think the difference between a functional, healthy person and a dysfunctional, unhealthy person is that the former knows how to recognize it and say, okay, I'm afraid of this thing. Now that I've said that out loud, I can actually face it and hopefully live my life. That's what it means to me, and that's what the book reflects to me.
Face it and ask for help with it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's very good addendum to that.
That's a very socially conscious thing that I don't think everyone really ever believes in. I think there's that mistrust of society is one of the reasons why fear is able to conquer. And I think that's kind of one of the big conceits of this book too, is that the idea that it is hard to trust your neighbors. It is hard to trust your friends. It is hard to conquer your own fears because of that mistrust. And maybe that's something that he's kind of getting at in this book as well. And that maybe you should actually trust if we did have that trust, if we did have that love, maybe fear wouldn't be such a big problem.
I think that's the thing that's most interesting to me, is that these are people that come back years later and they trust and love the friends that they probably only really truly trusted and loved in their life. Are the ones that they knew when they were kids, before they really had any of these responsibilities or anything like that. Like it was true blue, real. And I just think that I think it's interesting to me that King at this time, like you were saying, that if he was in fact thinking of hanging it up, going back and dealing with these things that he's fearing, or his mention of Clive Barker being like a better writer than him, or a horror writer at least, and all these things, and this total introspective thought about, well, what scares me, going back and tackling these things that scared these kids, and just the idea of fear in general. It is very, very cool that this ended up being kind of, well, at the time, like you said, or like Dan was mentioning, that his thesis. Personally, I think at this point in the book, it's dodgy. I think it needs to be dodgy in terms of whether we can conquer our fears. I mean, Stan certainly doesn't. And they illustrate that very clearly in the first part. Yeah. So I think it's scary that that it's out there, and that's something that maybe we're not going to be able to defeat this thing.
I think it's the parallel that I keep thinking about with this is, and I've always thought there are similarities, and maybe it's just because the way the films are presented, but you look at The Body, and so much of that book is I mean, that's a coming of age story as well, just as similar as it. and it involves a group of friends that bond, that are bound together, and how time separates them. And I think that King is really a strong proponent for friendship. And I think that in every one of his books, it's the connections that between people that ultimately lead to success. And
isolation is always the opposite.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's the truth, because I think what makes this book so palpable and tangible for anyone is that, yes, we all have grown up with fears and conquered our own sort of demons, but I think that they're when you think about people, if you have to move or if you have to grow up, I mean, the biggest fear and change is those that are around you, and those that have to make their own decisions. They have to make their own sort of choices in life, and whether you're going to be on that path with them. I mean, are you going to be surrounded by the same people that you love right now that you will be 5, 10, 15 years later? The people that you love, are they going to die? Are they going to move away? I think that's a huge big part of the fear. And I think that unity of the friendship here, there's a parallel with that as well. I think there's a tie of like, well, what if life changes and we aren't together anymore? Can I handle my own fears without you all? Is life changes for the worst, or does it change for the best without you? I think that, friendship is such an intrinsic value of life in general. And I think that there is something to be said about the Losers Club as a unity here, and what that says. I mean, and I think there's a lot of parallels between that and Stand By Me, in which you see a character that's surrounded by no friends or not Stand By Me, The Body, where you see a character that is surrounded by none of his friends anymore. They're all gone. They're in the past, and he's sitting there with what he learned. And granted, you're not really getting into Gordy's mindset at that point of what he's terrified of anymore, because he has his own children to worry about and all. But I think that sense of isolation, that sense of friendship is it's obviously paramount to this story, but I think that's a huge part of King, and maybe that's where he was at too. Maybe he felt isolated and alone. Sorry, I'm kind of going off on a tangent.
No, I think it is about where you draw your power from, and the warriors for light and life tend to draw it from each other, from a group dynamic. Whereas the powers for darkness and King books are always trying to, I'm about to teach Othello, so I'm thinking of everything in terms of it's like how Iago wants to set everyone apart and isolate them and prey on their individual fears so that they actually look at everyone else and their view is perverted, and they think that no one is with them and they are a lone victim, which is also kind of what produces bullies, and that's the difference between how the Losers Club is able to operate and how the bullies are able to operate.
I think it's also very cool that the next book that he would write is Drawing of the Three, which is all about, a loner coming together and creating this band of the quartet, to battle this evil. So that definitely is a theme there.
Well, I just think of, I know we would try to not get too personal with these episodes and stuff, but even just the conceit of this podcast, it's very self. One of the reasons why I thought we should be called the Losers Club is not only just because it is such a popular, book at the time, and it's great for SEO marketing and whatever, yada, yada, yada. But this has felt like a family. This has felt like a unity. There is that sort of, that we've all had really dramatic things that have happened over the course of a year and a half doing this podcast. And I think that there are ties, even just rereading this book now, and listening to Stephen Weber read it for me. I do feel that reassurance of just knowing that okay, I have been in this sort of abyssal darkness over the past past 7 or 8 months, and having that notion of knowing that I can turn to friends and talk to them about some things and go over these fears, and then they can share me their experience of those sort of feelings and those sort of fears, has definitely gotten me through and being able to conquer any sort of anxieties that I've had. Has it changed the fact that I still look in the mirror and I go, God damn it, I'm so worried about this and that? No, but it has helped in the sense of knowing that they are there. And if they weren't there, then who knows? I don't know where I would be. And I think that that's a very tangible emotion of this book, is just knowing how important that is in your life, no matter how old you get. And I think that's what King is definitely trying to sell with this book. At least that's what I get from this book.
And I don't think it's presumptuous to say that our listeners tap into that as well. We've received multiple messages saying I've been, mocked for putting Stephen King high on my favorite list, and it has been very empowering and very reassuring to find a group of people who are willing to delve into these books and take them seriously. And I feel as though I have found a group of people that I can relate to and take power from in this way. So it's a self-perpetuating mechanism, hopefully, that King is trying to kickstart here.
Well, we always say, I mean, I feel like we've probably said this before in the podcast, but, it's changed a little bit with the advent of Stranger Things and just nostalgia having this high currency these days. But at least for me growing up, it was not cool to read Stephen King or even like horror. That was not like a celebrated thing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I think most people who gravitate toward the genre, and I wasn't like picked on or anything, but it wasn't something I could really nerd out about all the time in class. You know what I mean? And I think people who get into genre fiction or get into horror, like a lot of times, most of them have had experiences with feeling maybe a little bit alienated, or at least not having people they can connect with over something that they're passionate about.
I think that's a total outsider. Yeah, I think that's what's such a big sell for this book too, is that I think in a meta way, this book actually does feel most like the emblematic book of Stephen King, because you do feel like the characters in this book, you feel marginalized, you feel. And certainly when it wasn't in vogue, that's exactly how I felt. It's like, oh, look at the weird, creepy kid reading the creepy book. And, when you read this book and you see like all these kids that are bound together by something that's very, they're united by that sort of eeriness, that sort of creepiness that they're experiencing. It's there is a parallel weird spiritual connection to be made between those and like fellow listeners or fellow, readers of King's work as well. So it's almost like this, like there is that sort of meta feeling to it.
Yeah, totally. I think that just when we started doing this podcast, it was just a bunch of friends that wanted to talk about Stephen King, and now it's become this huge network of losers across the globe.
Yeah.
And it's so rewarding to talk to people and have people come and say, finally, like you guys are saying things that I've said and thought for years, and never knew anybody else saw these things either. And it's this strange thing of coming together and coming together under strange circumstances too. And I'll cite Mel, our Bev of the podcast. When Mel joined, it was just kind of like this strange, like stars aligning. I don't know, not to put too much pressure on you, Mel, but we love you.
It was an exceptionally resonant, with this book in particular, circumstance. I mean, I feel like when Ben joins up with them and he was kind of like, I didn't even know what I was missing, I hadn't even conceived of having a group of friends like this. And now that I do, I can't really conceive of not having it. That's definitely like what it felt like. And then to actually start hanging out outside of the pod was like extremely rewarding in a way that was like, holy shit, this extends far beyond just people who get together to talk about books that they like.
Totally.
If I had to boil it down to like one word, it would probably be friendship for me.
Mm-hmm.
But do we want to talk any more about the hook, or do we want to get into the structure and format?
I think we should.
Structured format. Let's do it.
Look at me. Look at me, teacher.
All right. Well, now that we're all done crying and hugging each other, and
it was relevant sappiness.
It was. Let's talk about how King writes this book.
Yeah, let me ask a question. So King said that he thought that this was a mess and all over the place.
Yeah.
In general, before we get into chapter 1, do you guys agree with that?
Are we just talking about the first section, or
I would not. I mean,
the whole book.
Not
as
to
a
go
whole.
into too much detail, but just a yes or no. Like,
just give the actual structure of the book seems very purposeful to me.
Okay.
It's got 5 parts of 3 to 6 chapters each, and it's got 5 interludes, one between each of the 5 parts, and it's got an epilogue.
Right.
And that seems incredibly, purposeful. Again, like that doesn't seem like a mess going in.
Right.
It's been a while since I've done a complete reread, so I'll let you know my updates. But that seems structured to me.
Yeah, and I think that for me, the structure and format feel very sound and very well thought out. I do think toward the end, once again, I won't go too far into it, I do think King drops the ball a little bit with the actual events that happen later on.
I agree.
But to me, that's not really part of the structured format. It's something, a device that I love that he does throughout the book is that he alternates between the present and the past so much that a sentence from the present will directly segue into what's going on in the past and vice versa. And I actually think he handles the structure and format very well. It's more just that some of the content down the line, like I said, doesn't quite stick the landing. But yeah, what do you guys think about that?
I mean, I've always been a pretty big fan of just going back to the past and the present. I mean, we've had a lot of debates just with how the movie production is handled, the way that they've split up the youth and the adults, and I think it's actually I like that for the film. Just because, again, like I mentioned, I really do love a good reunion narrative, and I don't think you really get that so much when you do them all commingled together. But in terms of the book, I think it's interesting because you really do get introduced to the characters as adults before you even, actually meet them as children, which is so, in hindsight now, having actually seen, you see the 2017 film, which now feels like this ubiquitous sort of adaptation of it. It is weird to come to meet these adults and then find out all about them as children.
It's masterful in terms of suspense.
It really is, though. Yeah. I mean, it's the pacing and the nuance, the detail of how he weeds in all these sort of ways to kind of make callbacks is great. I mean, it's almost like very David Simon-esque in the sense that you probably sat there and just put all the details up on a bulletin board and was like, all right, how are we going to go back to this? How are we going to go back to that?
Well, and that's the thing. I don't agree with him. I don't think it's a mess. I think like you guys were saying, it's very plotted out. There's a lot of back and forth, and there's a lot of stories that happen. A lot of like, I remember this random story that, and that in terms of time, a conventional timeline, maybe you could say that, but it's all there, and it moves, and to me it did not feel all over the place. In terms of the movie, and I guess when you're reading it and you're introduced to all these adults, the kids. It's funny because a lot you guys read this when you were really little, but I think that he wasn't thinking kids were going to read this. He was thinking adults were going to read this. So it makes sense to have the adults first, and then like reminiscing on the past, because that's how he was approaching it as a writer, I think, looking back on childhood. So but I do agree with Mike, especially with like Stranger Things and having this kind of ET element to romanticizing kids and friendship, starting with the children, film wise, it's working. So I'm interested in it too, obviously chapter 2, but
can I tell you where I do think it's a mess?
Yes.
At least at this first section, I don't actually, I need to figure out how this plays out over the rest of the book, but how information is conveyed with regards to point of view and what this book as an object is, I think is very confused.
In the first section here?
In the first section, there's multiple instances of the narrator intruding, and we don't know who the narrator is, and they seem so random. On page 13, we have, if George had been inhabiting a later year, he would have thought of Ronald McDonald, and it's like, who's speaking there? The first line of the book is in first person, I believe. And on page 16, the boat passing out of this tale forever. And at page 39, at the time of this writing, and who is talking? We get the introduction to the first interlude with the notes from Mike Hanlon that reference, prior to their appearance here, these notes, blah, blah, blah. So is it King? Is it like some historian? The media is so mixed, and the narrator's intrusions are so inconsistent that it makes me wonder if he had some sort of vision that fell apart for how this book was being treated as an object.
It kind of reminds me of Christine.
Mike's book, yeah.
Well,
Christine does do that. Yeah, we talked about that a lot in that episode, yeah. Because
Christine all of a sudden shifts into perspectives halfway through, and then it goes back towards the end.
Right.
And that really did kind of mess with my head a little bit as well. I mean, it
It
does feel
definitely
weird that it is an omniscient. It's third person omniscient.
Well, yeah,
But-
but read the first sentence, which is so weird. The
Oh, I
terror,
know.
which would not end for another 28 years if it ever did end, began so far as I know or can tell with a
Yeah.
boat. And I'm just like, is it King? Like,
Is it Mike? Is it?
Is
Yeah.
it Bill?
Especially
in a
when you
weird
have
way?
someone like Mike Hanlon, who is such like he's such an anthropologist almost, or he's such a like there's so much precedence set on him being this archivist. To have another person who's not Mike Hanlon seems a little crazy to me. Yeah,
It definitely figures itself out as it goes, and I think it leans way more on Mike as we go forward. But yeah, I do agree. It is a little muddy here in the beginning, even in terms of how they start the story. Just jumping to the Adrian Mellon story right off the gate, and then it's like, wait, where are we? And especially if you know the story already, or if you've seen the miniseries maybe before reading this. I was a little thrown off. I didn't know what time period we were in. I was very like, wait, what's going on?
Here's a question then. What if this was split between the two sections of having the youth, and that starts off with Georgie and goes right through, just like Andreas Machete's film from last year. And then the second one did start off with Adrian Mellon, and both were perhaps told in the point of view of Mike Hanlon's book that is referenced throughout this entire first section.
I think what you gain from that is satisfaction from knowledge and the callbacks that come when you join the adults. There is a sense of satisfaction in seeing how the two match up, but I don't think that satisfaction is the same or as good or as rewarding as the satisfaction we get from mystery solving the entire time.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, and then seeing them come together.
And also too, like with how it plays into the rest of the book, especially towards the climax in both the kids' world and the adults' world in those two different timelines. I think what you lose also is that bridging of childhood and adulthood, and the blurring of it, and the forgetting of things, which I think you can get away. I think you can get away from that in the movie a little bit better, given the trademarks of the genre. You know what I mean? I just think that's harder to pull off like cinematically, but on the page, especially when you have this kind of elaborate structure that King has, I think it does work much better. Yeah, and you guys have touched on this a little bit, but something I had forgotten about because I had just seen the movie last year and I've read this book so many times, I forgot about how little he reveals in this first section. I mean, by the end of it, you don't really know what happens by the end. You just get little glimpses here and there. And once again, I think that's so effective and so savvy from that mystery solving standpoint. Like, you're several hundred pages into this book by the end of the first section, and you're still piecing together everything. And I think that is super rewarding.
And it also is eminently effective at rewarding rereads. You want to reread the book because you can spot things that you know upon reading it the first time.
Yeah, I after I was done, or even after the first part, I was like, oh God, I could, it's so dense. And I also think, it's huge in terms of the idea of forgetting things. So it's really rewarding to see. I mean, we're right there with the older versions of these people, and they're slowly rediscovering this horror that they've totally forgotten about. So I think in the book, it lends itself to that a lot more. I think it works a lot more. I'm really interested to see chapter 2, the film, to see if it works. And we've seen some footage from that already, or at least pictures of like them with their younger selves right in front of them, having these almost like waking dreams, and remembering these things. And I think that'll work really well on the screen. But I also love the miniseries. I love meeting each adult and going back, and then we have the reunion. So it's like I still think that really works on
kind of more
on screen as well. Yeah,
sort of thing.
It's a little messy if you look at the chapter titles. Like, it seems like we're establishing a pattern that then gets broken, and then the new one picks up. And like at first we have all these years, and then it's like, oh no, now there's patterns within patterns. We get Bill Denbrough beats the devil 1. So I think maybe that too is like, well, maybe you should have just kept it all over the place instead of trying to establish patterns.
Yeah.
Hold on, briefly. Can we talk about the quotes that there's quotes. Yeah. There's quotes before the entire book, which is just like, I think, just some quotes about being in town, and there's out of the blue and into the black, which does come into the section that we read. I just wanted to harp on the William Carlos Williams poem that is on the page introducing part 1. And it's from an epic poem called Patterson. And I just wanted to look up why he included this, because I don't really get it. Like, reading the poem, I was like, what is happening? But it's a long poem in 4. This is a quote from the author, William Carlos Williams. Patterson is a long poem in 4 parts, that a man in himself is a city, beginning, seeking, achieving, and concluding his life in ways which the various aspects of a city may embody, if imaginatively conceived. Any city, all the details of which may be made to voice his most intimate convictions. Part 1 introduces the elemental character of the place. The second part comprises the modern replicas. 3 will seek a language to make them vocal. And 4, the river below the falls, will be reminiscent of episodes, all that any one man may achieve in a lifetime. And I thought, reading that, maybe it's a little room 237, but I thought that matches up very well with what we're about to do.
I think so too. I think it absolutely does, and maybe that's pretty much of his insistence. I think if we're talking about the quotes, though, the one right under it is by my New Jersey boss, the Bard himself, Bruce Springsteen, and he references, at the time, this is pretty a new song for him, Born in the USA. It's the opening line, is born down in a dead man's town. And that's a pretty modern quote, for him to kind of put there. And this is only 2 years removed from that album, because Born in the USA is in '84, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and even the Neil Young one too, the Out of the Balloon into the Black. I mean, that was from Rust Never Sleeps, which is only the late '70s. So I think he's getting a little contemporary there with his rock references, and I fucking love both those songs. It is funny with the Springsteen one because, I mean, it's the curse of Born in the USA. It's why Rod Reagan co-opted it as a campaign song, even though the song is very much against what Reagan stood for. But it's funny because when you read the phrase "born down in a dead man's town," that is very accurate in describing it. But then when you hear the tone of it in the song, it's like so exuberant, It just feels like a little bit more bombastic than it is as a novel. But I think that just more ties to the tone of Born in the USA in general.
Well, it also includes and this is all before the contents. That Neil Young one is the Out of the Blue and Into the Black. That's like right before the whole table of contents, and right above that you get the quote from George Seferis, who's like a Greek poet. That is a Greek. It looks like a diplomat too. So I mean, which is interesting. So that quote is, "Old friend, what are you looking for? After those many years abroad, you come with images you tended under foreign skies, far away from your own land." And what do we make of that?
Yeah, it's just about an old friend coming
Homecoming.
home. Yeah.
But I think it's speaking to these things are universal concerns that span time. And we kind of get with the Springsteen and the Young, like maybe this is going to be a uniquely American story, but with the William Carlos Williams and the Seferis, it's also, again, a universal concern.
Well, I have an interesting fun fact that involves this George Seferis quote. Do you know where this also popped up in? It's a book that we talked about and involves a small town.
Roadwork.
They also Kings, Salem's Lot.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, both books open with this quote.
Good find.
Whoa, wow.
So it's very interesting that you would have that. I wonder what the impetus is for that, though. Is it both just a concept of that? Here's another town that's in Maine.
Well, I wonder if he uses it in any of his small town Maine stories.
I think it's just the two of these. You know,
I'm sure.
Which is maybe he forgot. That'd be great. He just
I've got this great quote. I've got this great quote I want to use in this. I've never used.
Have you heard this before?
Tabby, have I used this? And Tabby's like, oh fuck, I don't know.
It's like I don't really feel like
Oh, Steve, not with the George again.
This voice that we've gone into with King and Tabby, I can only think of their scene in Maximum Overdrive. Like this ATM just called me an asshole. Like that's just like how I picture their marriage now. Because we've done that.
All right.
Well, either way, we got some really great quotes, and just proves that King loves to scrapbook his work with some other pop culture. Maybe he could have scrapbooked this book a little bit.
That's such a good verb to use. Like
he likes scrapbooking.
It is a scrapbook, and like this whole book is like a scrapbook.
Mm-hmm. And it almost feels like
in the book.
I almost feel like you could have leaned a little harder on his aesthetic for Carrie here. if he would have just used supplemental materials to tell the whole story.
Oh,
Yeah, that would have been a really cool throwback to that. Yeah, if we had maybe some news articles, just straight up articles or
It just kept going.
interviews or something with the town after post, what happens to the town.
Maybe Max Brooks can rewrite this and write it just kind of like similar to World War
Although
Z.
Mike
God.
does say he can only find things out that are accurate through oral tradition.
Yeah.
None of it is really documented that well.
But hey, you know that once it's insisted in King's Dominion, it's fact. The majority of the time, like all those situations, and they're like, we didn't find out what happened. Similar to back in the 1800s.
Some people thought,
which means it happened.
It happened,
So
yeah, exactly.
Come on up, Richie. I got a balloon for you. Don't you want a balloon? What's the matter? One balloon, not enough. Try a bitch!
Well, you heard the clown. That's the wrap on this episode. Now, don't go away. Next week, we're going to return with part 1, The Shadow Before, which will cover After the Flood, 1957, After the Festival, 1984, The 6 Phone Calls from 1985, and the first interlude from Mike Hanlon's journals. In this episode, we'll continue to run through our other categories, such as Heroes and Villains in the Cemetery and Word Processor of the Gods, or Pound Cake, or King's Dominion, Misery, all your favorites. So, until then, long days and pleasant nights.
I got some hot friends. God, I got some hot friends. I got some hot friends. God, I got some hot friends. But you want somebody to treat you good. But it's hard to...
This has been a bloody, disgusting show. Thanks for tuning in. If you like our programming, consider searching for other bloody, disgusting podcasts, such as Creepy, Horror Queers, The Boo Crew, SCP Archives, Nightlight, Margaret's Garden, Nightmare on Film Street, and more.